always interesting. So hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alana. These are our 15-minute research boosts, which came out of the student asking me during boot camps last summer, could I please do a series where I talked about my own practice as a researcher and an author, and some of the hints of the things I do. And today's topic about reflection and reflection with an X have very much to do with my own personal practice. And I believe that this conversation is key to anyone who wants to do well in an academic environment. So I've started the poll. There's a poll in the room. I've asked the people to go into the poll and claim some of these as they're appropriate. So you might already be working in groups and debriefing after you present or you finish your project. Some of you may be keeping a journal, and if you're researchers, I highly recommend you keep a research journal. You might write sticky notes when you have ideas, and they might go all over your wall or your computer. You might take videos or pictures when you want to remember something. You might attend courses and conferences and take notes, but not just take notes about what was being said, but also put your own ideas up as they came by. You might find that when you are quiet and you think about what you think as well as what you're doing, that helps make you calm and helps your learning advance. And I just want to point out that portion. I was aware of it as I was sitting down because I've had quite a hectic day until now. That portion where you reflect does help calmness. So for any of you who may sometimes be plagued with anxiety in graduate school, this is another reason this practice is so important. If you are someone who's interested in rigor as part of your research practice, then this is a key element of rigor. And if you're someone who likes to, feel confident that what you're thinking and what you're doing are all leading you where you want to go. So that's a lot of things that I personally take from this practice. So I personally would have said yes to everything in that list. If some of them sound interesting, then you're in the right place, and we'll see today real quickly how that is done. So here we go. I am a reflective practitioner. It is part of my rigor. It is also, I believe, part of rigor for all qualitative practitioners. It centers us, and it centers our practice, and it keeps our project moving forward. I'm going to talk about the times we need to reflect and also what is reflexive. And then I'm going to real quickly give you some how-tos and some formats and some tips. So when do we reflect? Why reflect? We reflect to take stock, to process, and to understand. And for those of you that have been attending these 15 minutes, we've talked about cognitive transfer from what you are learning to where you are going. And reflection is the grease that makes transfer easiest. When you want to make sense of something, you reflect. When you're not sure and you want to make sense. When you want to share, before you share, you reflect. And that will make your written, your oral, your art, your media, whatever kind of sharing you're doing, come more easily. Give you solid ground to walk on. Or to write on, or to do media on, to release. Okay, so there are times when something bothers us. It isn't quite right. Or perhaps there was an incident and we're anxious about it. Or any time we have upset or uneasy feelings, reflection can be a practice that helps us sort it out in our head and calm us down. And then when we want to transform an experience into learning, we reflect on it. So when do we reflect? The time we need to reflect. So during reading, we need to have a reflective practice. I'll give you a form that makes that easy. When we're watching, and the same form works for watching a webinar or a video. At the end of a session, when you're collecting data, you'll want to do a different kind of reflection. And I'll talk about some formats that will help. And that goes for whether you're collecting data or when you're, I said collecting twice. The second one was supposed to say analyzing data. At the end of analysis, we have even more robust things we need to think about. Whenever you collaborate, you should reflect as a group at the end of each session. It will take your team and your collaborations much more smoothly. So what is this reflexive with an X word? We reflect as people when we think about what has happened from a space different from it actually happening. So reflection with the CT is not what actually happened, not a descriptive statement, but something that takes us into how we feel about it, what we think might be the consequences of it, takes us into what we cognate on as being assumptions or biases or other things that influenced what we would have said as the description. So reflection with a CT, I don't say the word so differently that you might be able to understand the difference. So REFLECT, reflect, is our mind looking at something from different angles. Reflex is very personal. It's when I ask myself, what is there about me that helped cause this result? So we might think about reflexive if we're having a situation that isn't going quite well, and we step back and we say, to what extent am I responsible for my half of this situation? But in science, reflexive acknowledges the fact that even though there's a whole empirical stance that we can measure things objectively, human beings don't ever quite do anything completely reflective. And so we need to have a reflexive moment on, I'm getting all exactly the same answers from my survey I thought I would get. Are there things in the way those survey questions were set up that people could have guessed what I was looking for? What are the ways in which I use my voice or my language or other things that propels people to go the way I want them to go? Because to the extent, and that we all have these abilities, that we use those abilities in science, we need to own it and set it as a limitation or in some other way. And that's reflexive comments. It helps us avoid failure. Because if we don't know how we are influential, we continue to build biased outcomes. So how do you do it? Well, the easiest thing is you draw a line down the middle of any page you're taking notes on, or maybe a little off to the right. And the left-hand side is where you put your descriptive notes, and the right-hand side is where you put your comments, your ideas, your things that have to do with you and how you are responding to what is going on. So it's almost as though the left brain is the descriptive side, left side, and the right brain, which lets you into the wholeness that you are, is what you're putting on the right. Now, I used a table here very consciously because actually, if I were a graduate student, I would sign up for a lot of PD education webinars, but I wouldn't come to them live. I'd watch them by recording, because by recording, I can stop the video when I have a thought and I can really capture my reflection. And then I can go back to the video. On the website, on the PD Education website, there is it's a setup for research video that I did, and it talks about reflection. And I gave an example, actually showed you what I did in Evernote as I was watching a video conference. And I took good reflexive notes on about 5 hours of conference in less than an hour. So it can maximize your time and give you that sense of what you learned. Because if you watch 5 hours of video, you can often go, well, that was interesting, but what exactly did I really learn? And I've given you a link, just one more thing about that. I've given you a link to that video. It's in the chat, it's in the recording, in the handouts, and the handouts are up on the web. Okay, so and other kinds of formats you might want to use, though. You might want to use a SWOT analysis. This is particularly good when you're working at the end of something. What worked well, what didn't work well, why not, what were its strengths, what were its weaknesses, what were the opportunities that, having done this, are now open to you, and what are the threats, where did it fail, what might have gone wrong, what would I do differently next time. Another format is a fishbone diagram. It allows you to say, okay, what are the 4 major learnings here? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what are all the subtopics that come under that, that I can learn how to move into the next direction? So it's as though you're deboning a fish. So you can go faster in that direction. But just to say that a lot of diagrams work as stepping off points for our mind to think differently. And anytime our mind thinks that way, we are into reflective mode. Also, there's 2 older webinars on the pd.education site by Professora Maria on reflective reading. And that's very crucial to good academic work when we are getting into the research and figuring out how it works, and more importantly, how it works for us in our research. And Adrian is mentioning the Cornell Notes template. Yeah, that's another great way to go. It's a little bit complex for me. I like simple line down the middle, but Cornell Notes, if you haven't looked into them, they're well documented on how useful they are to help you see both the descriptive elements of your mind and the reflection that comes with that when you're open to that. So just a few tips from my practice. Like any good habit, it comes and goes. And what counts is how you pick it up. So I say I'm a reflective practitioner. Do I remember to do this all the time? No. What triggers my doing it is when I'm feeling uneasy, I'm getting prepared for something that's big, I'm about to write a journal article, I've just finished my data analysis. Those kind of big moments trigger my reflective practice. And then I keep it up for a while, and then it sort of slips. I separate into 2 types of reflection in my head: simple reflection and debriefs. And it's simple. Simple, I'm just keeping track of what I'm thinking as I go along. And I do that mostly when I'm absorbing ideas from a completely different field. Like I might review marketing materials. The marketers and the trainers in the industrial world have a lot to say that I can translate into what I do in the academic world. So as I'm watching their stuff, I'm reflecting as I go. I call that simple. Debrief is the bigger SWOT analysis, fishbone, Cornell, whatever, and it's at the end of a cycle for me. And so that's how I use it. First reflections. Oh, the first time you go through reflection, In fact, maybe every so often, as you begin a real reflexive practice, I suggest you could talk it out with a friend, somebody who really knows you, because they will be able to say to you, well, I know this about you. And when you tell me this story of how it went, I wonder to what extent you might have done X, Y, or Z. Not the easiest thing to listen to, but really useful to us. And as I said, reflection is very much an us and our gut level knowing about ourselves kind of practice. And if there's an author, Cunliffe, Cunliffe, and I adore the way she talks about the process of reflexivity. I like these two kind of diagrams too. I like icebergs. I like to think about what was easy to see and what was not so easy to see. So that provokes my ideas, as do mind maps. Mine tend to have lines drawn all over. Oh, this goes to this. So I'm a believer in using diagrams.